Meanwhile, the U.S. is planning a flight test of its THAAD missile defense system, firing interceptors from Alaska. This, of course, just days after North Korea test-launched its first intercontinental ballistic missile, which experts predict could possibly hit Alaska. Well, the nuclear program of Kim Jong-un, of course, was one of the critical topics at the G20 summit, where President Trump consulted with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, among others.
We're also talking, obviously, about North Korea and the problem and menace of North Korea. And the Prime Minister is, I will say this, very, very focused on what's going on with respect to North Korea. So we will continue those discussions.
Yeah, you understand why he's focused, because those missiles in some cases have gone right over Japan. The president also, of course, pressed Chinese President Xi Jinping, saying the issue of North Korea will be solved, Mr. Trump said, one way or another. Joining us is Van Hipp, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army and Chair of the American Defense International. Van, good to see you. First of all, this new THAAD test, why is it significant?
Well, this will be the 14th one since 2006, and Eric, they've been 100% successful since then. Now, THAAD can reach an altitude of 93 miles, so it's mainly for more of the short-range or medium-range missiles. This will be a simulated test of a North Korean intermediate-range ballistic missile, and it's been very accurate. And this test will probably take place in the next couple of weeks.
Is it different, though, from the others? As you said, THAAD's usually used for short-range, intermediate range, but, you know, not an intercontinental ballistic missile. Is there a difference?
There is a difference, and you've got a system known as GMD. That's what we've got at Fort Greely, Alaska. That's a ground-based system. That is designed to go up into space, and it's primarily designed for intercontinental ballistic missiles. The problem with that is it's only been successful about 55% of the time since 2010. But, Eric, the last several tests, they've been spot on, and they did a test, a simulated test against a North Korean ICBM in May, and it was 100% accurate. But, Eric, I got to say this. Thank God for the wisdom of President Ronald Reagan. Look what he had to go to. We would not even be having this discussion right now about interceptors and missile defense had we not had a president in the 1980s who had a vision to give this country a missile defense system. And I think
but he was attacked for that. I mean, remember Star Wars?
He sure was, and thank God for what he did, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. We would not even be having a capability like THAAD or GMD or Patriot or the Aegis ballistic missile defense system we have on ships.
So you're saying without the President Reagan's foresight, we'd be kind of up the creek without a paddle right now?
This president would have even fewer options, and really he's got no good options right now because, Eric, the fact of the matter is prior administrations, both Republican and Democrat, kicked the can down the road on the North Korean threat. And I got to tell you, it's that ballistic missile threat combined with that nuclear capability that we've got to watch out for. And we know that the Iranians and the North Koreans both have the nuclear warhead designs of the infamous Pakistani scientist Dr. A.Q. Khan. And that's what we've got to watch for. And you can rest assured that's what they're trying to do, is to perfect, and this is a tricky part, how you get that miniaturized nuclear warhead on an ICBM. That's what they're trying to do.
You hit something on the head just a moment ago. You talked about kicking the can down the road. If you look at the Investors Business Daily, has an editorial a couple of days ago. It said that President Clinton basically canceled the one that President George H.W. Bush had. President George W. Bush then restarted it, but then when President Obama got into office, he cut it by 13%. And then he had to, in 2013, restart it again, basically, because of the North Korean missile threat.
That's right. In 2013, he had to go back to then reinstitute President George W. Bush's plan and beef up our missile interceptors at Fort Greely and at Vandenberg. There's plenty of blame to go around, but I got to tell you, this president is leading. He's doing the right things. He's putting pressure on the Chinese. He's putting pressure on the Russians to put pressure on the Chinese. And look, the Chinese, we all know they talk out of both sides of their mouth, but they, just like Iran, are the great enablers of the North Korean regime. They helped create this mess. And I think this thing has gotten probably even beyond the control of the Chinese. But, Eric, they've got the best intel, if anyone does, of what's going on inside the Hermit Kingdom.
Yeah, but how do you know what's going on inside of Kim Jong-un's mind? I mean, I'm going to read you a couple of quotes from the past when we've had these before. You know, we flew some B-1 bombers. We reported on that. over near the DMZ just today. This is what they said in June. The U.S. imperialists committed a grave military provocation by letting a formation of infamous B-1B nuclear bombers fly over South Korea once again to stage a nuclear bomb-dropping drill. The gangster-like U.S. imperialists are making all the more desperate in their moves to ignite a nuclear war despite the repeated warnings of the DPRK. Here's something else they've said about us. If the American imperialists provoke us a bit, we will not hesitate to slap them in the face, or I didn't say face, just slap them, with a preemptive nuclear strike. The United States must choose. It is up to you whether the nation called the United States exists on this planet or not. So how do you deal? Is it even possible to negotiate and sit down when they've scuttled deals in the past with this type of rhetoric? Or is it just rhetoric?
Well, to say that Kim Jong-un has some mental health challenges is an understatement. And I think the Chinese are even beginning to realize this. Go back just a couple of months ago, he was trashing the Chinese. And those are the kinds of things I think that the Trump administration and the rest of the free world have got to convince the Chinese of, that this guy's a madman. You can't even control him. Help us to have regime change and stop the nuclear program they've got. And it's all about stopping and never getting to that day when they can accommodate a nuclear warhead on an ICBM. That's what it's all about right now.
We apparently are not there yet, but the predictions are that they could be, and that's the challenge. Van Hipp, always good to see you. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon, of course.